Good evening, everyone. Guys, I'm going to give you a Ukraine update and some perspective that you'll just not get anywhere else. Why? Because it's mine. So I've been speaking to some of my friends that are in Ukraine at the moment. They've been telling me what's been happening on the front line, and we've been contextualizing that and thinking, what could be happening in the next couple of weeks. Well, for those of you who remember, on the first of October, when I said, so 1st of October, you had a huge Middle East escalation. You had troops Israeli boots on the ground in Lebanon. What I said is, after about 2-3 weeks, you will start to see a switch fire. And then as the media starts to die out in Israel, you'll see a big escalation in Ukraine. This is what's been happening historically. Obviously, it's not always in and around those timelines, but that's kind of what happened. So what we were talking about fits perfectly into that narrative. Guys, just before we go on, please click the buttons down below and like and subscribe my page. Really helps me out when you guys do that. Pushes me up through the algorithm and it helps the channel grow. So me and my friends were talking. We're on various group chats, and I'll just read you. I was asking what the update is in Ukraine, what's been happening. So I'll talk about what was said on the group chat, and then I will go on to and we'll relate that to what's been happening on the ground, and then something that's happened like 5 hours ago or something, maybe 6 hours ago, that just shows people what the West are actually dealing with here, and we're sleepwalking into oblivion. Ukrainians are fighting off Russian advances in the Kursk region. Russians initially had some success, but they couldn't hold the ground. Either that or they're not advancing anymore. Here's the thing. Lots of experts are now claiming that a Russian large-scale advance in all directions could happen in a couple of weeks. Now, when we talk about these things and we wonder where we're getting this information from, a lot of all this information's already out there. Now, in today's world with the social media and, encrypted messaging, both sides on these battlefield can have messages. Now, when I was, and again, this was like 2018 or something, maybe 2017, when I was out in the Donetsk region doing an assessment with the Ukrainian military. When you go out and do these assessments, you can there's a few ways you can do it. First of all, you can go out there with like a load of security, with a load of armed guards. You can go out there in a fancy Land Cruiser that's all armored. You can insist on staying in the best hotels and only meeting the colonels, only meeting the generals. But guess what? That doesn't help. That does not get you a battlefield analysis. That does not get you a good understanding of what's actually happening. So if you turn up, with one interpreter in a taxi, in a beaten up old car, you embed yourself with the local troops, you embed yourself in with the private soldiers, you embed yourself in with the guys who are on the front line, then guess what? You get your own analysis of what's happening on the front line. You get your own understanding of what's happening. You get your own understanding of the environment and the workplace climate. If people, and that's one of the main problems that we have at the moment in the West. We're dealing with these people that go out there and they do these assessments. They're dealing, they will go out there, and because they're a retired colonel or something, a retired colonel, obviously, he needs to be treated well. So a retired colonel, he will go out there and he will stay in the best hotels. He will have the best food, the best accommodation. He will speak to the highest ranking generals. And guess what? Everybody lies. Those guys will tell him one thing and something else will be happening on the front line. I can guarantee it, guys. All right. So that's how I used to do my assessments. I used to go there really low key. I would be plain clothes. I would be and I would embed myself in with people. And by doing that, I could find out how these people are operating. And one of the things that really astounded me, and again, this is back in the day, so it may or may not still be happening. I suspect it's still happening. At around 12 o'clock, these guys were on, so the Russian side and the Ukrainian side, they were on encrypted messaging. So they just say to each other, look, it's 12 o'clock, 12:01, we're having his dinner. We're gonna have an unofficial ceasefire. And that's just what happened, guys. That's not me speculating. That's me first-hand experience witnessing that. So, you've got to, when you're looking at these situations, and, and I'm understanding of my own experience in being in warfare and being in combat, the people on the front line, genuinely, they don't particularly want to fight. They get told to fight, off somebody behind them, and that person will be somebody behind them, and they'll get told by somebody behind them. And usually you follow this all the way back to some overprivileged, self-entitled politician who's sending those guys off to fight. And you get this on both sides. So, and a lot of people, when they're trying to do battlefield analysis, they just don't understand this. They don't understand the human factor. They don't understand that humans genuinely don't want to, they don't want to charge at each other with rifles. Anyway, but it does look like the Russians are preparing for another, for a huge offensive on all sides. I think it's what's the word I'm looking for? When we were watching the advances towards Pokrovsk, we said, right, okay, they've stopped, and it seems a bit strange that they've stopped when they were making so much ground. So what it could be right now, it could be that from what we're getting told, and remember, sorry guys, the reason I went off onto a waffle and told you about the social media is because a lot of information gets passed through these guys. There's a lot of chatter between these guys, and it just happens. So if one of the sides is preparing for, some sort of ground invasion, with the chatter or the chatter that, things that people say in their chats, it could give something away. Now, I'm not saying that, I'm not saying it's foolproof, because it's not. But from the people I've spoke to, they're talking about the Russians could do a mass push on all sides. Now, for me, that is more fitting, that it fits into this time scale, So we could have this situation right now where the Israelis on Friday maybe strike the Iranian oil facilities. Then maybe the next week, the Russians have a mass escalation. And then we have got literally the world in flames, the fuel prices rocketing. And then Donald Trump will be there going, I told you diplomacy doesn't work. You've got to be strong with these people. I'll stop the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. He's not going to stop the war in 24 hours. So, but that's like the rhetoric that leads towards it. This is like why you've got to look at the timings of everything, because everything's timed, all right? It's timed. There's so many reasons. You're going to time your attacks politically. So remember when I said, these attacks will be, you've got the private soldiers on the front line, and they're going to be the ones doing the charging. And then you've got, then you've got your, it's totally different, but you'll go with me. So you've got your privates on your front line, and then you've got your officers, then you've got your higher officers, then your colonels, your generals, and then your politicians. And it's the push the word comes to go and fight, and then it filters down, and these guys have to go. So these politicians here, their decision to go to push or to drive forwards, a lot of these pushes, especially on these big battlefields, a lot of these decisions will be political. Excuse me. Especially if it's a non-tactical situation. Obviously, the tactical situations whereby you've got commanders on the ground and they're operating and they're reacting, that's a tactical situation. But when you're talking about these big strategic moves, this is almost always got some political influence to it. Whether we like that or not, that's just the way it happens. Now, with that political influence, there's a sway of financial incentive. Remember what we always say, bad things happen on a Friday because people can make a ton of money on the stock market if you know what's coming. So, for example, these oil facilities in, in fact, yeah, we'll go with that one because we spoke about it in the earlier video. The oil facilities in Iran that look like they're going to be struck potentially this Friday. I think this Friday, or certainly this weekend. If you know that these are going to be struck and these are going to go down, and you know the price of oil is going to rocket, and you've got money to put into oil. And guys, I'm not saying you put money into oil or any shares at the moment. Obviously, this is not financial advice. If you need financial advice, go and find a competent financial advisor. But if you know that this is going to happen, and you know that these oil facilities are going to be struck, and you know that the price of oil is going to skyrocket, why wouldn't you make money out of that? Why would you know that this is coming and not make money out of it? It's absurd. It's absurd to even think that people don't want to make money. It's ridiculous. So, another example, if the same airstrikes are going to go in and they're going to destroy an oil pipeline, and then whoever's doing the target strikes, they know that all the oil then will have to be rerouted through another oil pipeline. Well, guess what? You're going to invest in the company that runs that oil pipeline. So what's coming, you can make a ton of money. And again, why wouldn't you do this? So all these things have some sort of these strategic moves have some sort of political affiliation. And if the Russians did do a huge push before the US election, which would fit in, that would fall directly into Trump's hands. Trump could say, look, you're not strong enough to deal with the Russians. Kamala, you can't deal with Putin, which she can't, and that would get him more votes. That's the reality. So you've got to understand why these things are happening. And, from I won't talk about everything that we spoke about on the chats, but, the main jux of it is, it's looking really likely that there's going to be a big escalation on all sides from the Russians. Now, again, this would fit perfectly into that time narrative, into that temporal window. But anyway, so let's go on to what's been happening in Ukraine itself. So this is the news article from 5 hours ago. I'll share this with you real quick. Ukraine claims Russia killed 9 drone operators after they had surrendered. Deep State, so that's the map I use. It's a really good website. I'll put the link at the end. A Ukrainian battlefield analysis site close to Ukraine's defense ministry alleges the prisoners of war were shot on the 10th of October in the Russian region of Kursk. 9 of its drone operators. I'll put the link in the article. Ukraine's human rights ombudsman has urged international organizations to respond. So I don't want to go. The article is what it is, guys. It's non-confirmed, but you can pretty much, if it's come out there on the mainstream and there's enough information about it, it's pretty much, it's a high likelihood that happened. Now, if we look back at the absolute atrocities that have been, that have happened by the Russians, you can go all the way back to the, first of all, we can go back to the 2014 invasion when, the Russians shot down MH17. That's been identified now. There's been many studies and, lots of documentation on this that I can remember living that experience. And, and that whole time frame, I can remember, the Russians just point blank denying that they'd done this, and then saying it with the separatists. It was the separatists in the Donetsk region. Guys, if you're fighting a separatist war, you don't buy anti-aircraft missile systems. You buy small arms and you conduct guerrilla tactics. That's just the reality. That is the only way you can conduct yourselves. Obviously, if you're a state-sponsored military or state-sponsored mercenaries, then you can have air defenses. Now, this air defense system, it was a Buk missile and it came from Russia, and people traced this by using open source materials. They traced these trucks all the way back to their source. and even, the article was, I think Bill and Cat did the article, and it said when they crossed the border, what towns they went through, and then when they went back. They even found out names and key personnel, and this has all come out in a court. So when we look at these things that have happened in, I think it was 2014, and the Russians, total denial. I often put myself in the shoes, because some of the when these aircraft landed, a lot of these people had a lot of people's phones were out, which means that they were trying to make calls or send text messages as they, as the allegedly guys. These guys, what I'm saying now is what I've heard firsthand. I don't know if there's any official documents on this. This is just what I've spoken to people about. And I often think how terrified you would be falling, from that height with your family, and you're with your children, and then it's just terrible, guys. And the West is so fractured, and we're so divided at the moment through years of ideological subversion, through years of our universities being infiltrated by communists and socialists, and anyway. Then we skip forwards to the 2022 invasion. Some of the things that happened in the 2022 invasion, I got asked if I wanted to help with an investigation. A good friend of mine I think he's ex-Tupar, I think. He said to me, he said, "Look, Sean, I've been involved in some of these investigations myself." He said, it's not something for your soul. He said, it's not something you want to do. So I turned that offer down. But I understood the source, the source material. I spoke to some of the witnesses, and I saw a lot of the drone footage of things that were happening by rank and file Russian soldiers in Bucha, in Irpin, in Borodyanka. And it's difficult to contextualize, like, at what point at what point are these in humanity? Because it's okay, you can blame Vladimir Putin for sending this invasion. That's fine. You can blame Vladimir Putin, and ultimately he is to blame. But then when you see how the soldiers conduct themselves on the ground, you see the atrocities they're doing, and you see that and witness that. Well, I guess not firsthand, but I've seen a lot of drone footage that's not out in open source. I don't think it will be for a long time. But from that drone footage, it's really difficult to try and contextualize why they act like that, because ultimately everybody's a human being. And I can remember when I was in the invasion of Iraq, not one person in any unit I was always with one para, but like nobody in any of those attachments, nobody ever acted like that. Nobody ever had disrespect for human life. And this is what people forget. This is what people don't understand, what we are dealing with. And people, we look at these things with Western eyes, and we can't look at these things with Western eyes. We have got, right now in the United Kingdom, we have got the worst Premiership team that we could possibly imagine. I would struggle to put together a worse team that we could. I think if I went to my local Tesco's and asked the first 5 checkout people, to go and run government, I think they would do a better job. I really do. But anyway, guys, we just need to contextualize what the actual threat is, and look back through. We don't really have to look back far through history to understand, Russian lies, Russian manipulation, and a lot of people, because there's that much misinformation and disinformation, it's hard to know what's true. It's hard to know what's right. Well, I'll tell you this. I'll tell you this for free. Malaysian Airways MH17 was shot down. It was shot down. Not only was it shot down, but the Russians denied it. They denied it. I think they've still, I still don't think they've admitted it. The Russians sent assassins over to the United Kingdom to poison people, and they were killing people on the streets of the United Kingdom. This happened, This has happened several times, you know, and it's we look at these problems with Western eyes, and we can't look at them with Western eyes. We've got to understand the cultures. And, you know, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with, you know, I'm sure the Russians who live in Russia, they are fine, you know, they get along, they've got a great economy. The problem is we're heading towards a conflict with with these two nations now, East versus West. We're coming at loggerheads. And we still don't understand the threat. The Russians understand the threat. The Russians understand their goals, their objectives, what they want to do. But here in the West, we're so fractured. Nobody knows what to do. And it's just, we are so fractured at the moment, and nobody really understands what this is, because a lot of the information is hidden. There's misinformation, there's disinformation campaigns about people. So nobody really knows what to, you know, nobody really knows what to believe anymore. So nobody believes anything. So people put their head in the dirt, and, you know, and we just kind of don't care anymore about what's happening around the world. Guys, it's absolutely insane. Anyway, that was the main update on the, you know, on the Ukraine front. A lot of speculators are saying now, a lot of people are saying, I would, and me included, that the Russians are looking like a big push in the next couple of weeks, but a push on multiple fronts. And this would have to coincide before, this would have to happen before the US election for it to have full political, you know, the best political outcome. Also, remember, you know, when these things happen, people make a lot of money. They do. It's just the reality of warfare now. Why things happen on certain days, why things happen on certain dates, why company X will be chosen over company Y. Guys, absolute insane times. You know, we've got Russia and Iran and this, you know, this military and strategic partnership. We've got the BRICS nations rising. You know, and when we look at Thucydides' trap, violence becomes the, you know, violence is the normal, not the peace. Anyway, guys, I'm going to back to grid, and I'll get you guys another video later.